I'll put the heart at the back and leave the pendant at the front. Is that better?
Okay.
You comfortable like that?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello. My name is Lily Ebert, and I was born in Hungary.
My name is Anita Lasker-Wallfisch, and I was born in Breslau, which is now called Wrocław. Used to be German, now it is Polish.
Arek Hirsch, and I was born in Poland.
Manfred Goldberg. I was born in Kassel in Germany in 1930.
My name is Ziggy Schipper. I was born in Poland in a city, second largest city, Łódź.
Helena Stella Aronson. I was born in a small town called Pabianice.
My name is Rachel Levy. I was born in Czechoslovakia in 1930 in a little village called Bohuc.
I thought we owed it to these remarkable people just to remember them in this way. There is something very special about the portrait and about the artist's eye in bringing out the real underlying character, personality, and meaning of the person who's sitting for the portrait. I wanted to try and capture that moment before rather remarkable people disappear from this life.
I thought, what a wonderful honor to be chosen by Prince Charles to have a portrait for posterity.
I am rather nervous about what the end product will be.
I wanted to look how I see myself, but that never happens. It's like looking at passport pictures. You never like your passport pictures. But if you look at them later on in life, you think, oh, it wasn't too bad. That's what age does for you.
This really is the sort of most important portrait I've ever painted because it has a purpose beyond just being a picture. I am a witness to a witness, and hopefully the portrait will be a record of that.
Portrait commissions are definitely not something I would normally do. Look at all these wonderful photographs. And I think that the opportunity to meet Ziggy actually drew me to the project.
I would have never expected something like that in my career as an artist. And then I realized that it would have been also a great responsibility to paint the portrait of Arek and to tell his story.
I met her right in the thick of COVID. It was a very strange situation. It was very unusual for a sitting.
I started to paint this portrait in a completely opposite process as normal.
You should have painted me when I had hair.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
We had like 3 virtual sittings.
How do you feel, Arek?
How do you feel?
Okay.
It was a very challenging experience.
That way, you hold his head and I'll just take the picture with his head. So...
had a very nice, protected childhood.
Well, we were 5 children. My mother and father, we were very, very orthodox.
I used to go ice skating in the winter and did all the normal thing what a young boy does.
My mother and Marianne, and that's quite interesting. That's our house in Breslau coming out. I suppose it says Dr. Lasker here.
Yeah.
Or somewhere.
Yeah.
There's a funny picture of me pretending to play the cello, where I have a sort of children's broom and a comb, and some music in front of me, and I was singing. So I think my parents must have said, I think she wants to play the cello.
I had friends, I had Christian friends, Jewish friends. School was lovely. I was quite a good pupil. I think I was 3rd in the class. Life was sweet.
Really exciting seeing him again, so I could actually draw him from life, because obviously there's so little information sometimes in the Zoom sittings that I kind of longed to actually be sitting with him and drawing him. Hello, Manfred!
Hello, Clara. Lovely
So
to
good
see
to
you.
see you. At the end of one of the Zoom sittings, he said, you know, you're going to paint my soul, and I thought, well, that would be the dream, you know. So I want to kind of try and understand as much of him as I can to try and get as close to that as I can.
Hello, lovely to see you.
Yeah, likewise. How are you? You all right?
Better by seeing you.
Aw.
Hi, Z. I brought you flowers from my garden. It's lovely to see you.
Oh, it's lovely. Thank you very, very much.
When I have a very fixed idea, okay, I'm going to photograph Ziggy like this, he's going to be doing this, he's going to wear this, then it becomes kind of staged.
These are very delicate because they're from my garden.
I said, you know, an open shirt or something that Ziggy's very comfortable in, that he wears a lot. Because normally I work with people who don't have any clothes on at all. So this is unusual for me too, to have actually think, okay, I'm going to paint a shirt. I don't actually often do that.
Hello, nice to see you again. Please come in.
So that'll do for now, I think.
But you cannot do me a bit when I was younger.
Well, that's quite hard. I have looked at photographs of you younger, and so I sort of hope that that comes through. The other thing is, though, it's fantastic that you are the age that you are, and as you know, have as much vitality and brightness that you have.
So you cannot paint me how I was when I was 18.
No, not when you were 18.
Say
no.
20.
20, all right, maybe then.
That's my mother. And there's my little brother and I. He couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old there.
No.
The Nazis didn't waste any time. They passed hundreds of anti-Jewish laws, beginning more or less immediately that they came to power.
And that there were problems, I only realized when I was about 8 years old. It's interesting, that was 1933, how early it all started, the madness. Because I went to a small private school, and I was about to wipe the blackboard when a child said, "Don't give the Jew the sponge." And that was like a bombshell to me. I said, well, what was he talking about? What is this, a Jew? You know, I was 8 years old. So I didn't take too long to understand what it is to be a Jewish, yeah.
I was enrolled in the only Jewish school in our town. These Hitler youth, at school leaving time, they would find groups of Jewish boys, and they assembled and began taunting us and sometimes attempt to physically assault us.
Then my father came one morning because he didn't live with us, and he said there's going to be a war between Germany and Poland.
The German, unfortunately, started straight away with the Jewish population. Humiliating, getting people at random, especially with religious people with beards, cutting the beards.
One waited for the next blow, you know.
We knew that bad things were coming and that people were being taken away. We knew that.
And then bit by bit, the deportation started. And then my parents were deported, which left just my sister and myself, minors.
One night they came for my father, wanted to take him for work, and he escaped. Then they came back for my brother, who was about 12 and a half. They took him. He escaped. And then they came back, and I was 11 years old, and they took me.
My father was taken away much earlier, which all of the young men in the village were taken away for labor camp, where they had to work hard, and we never heard from him again.
You know, it was called they're going to be taken to the east to be resettled. It didn't take too long, then one understood there was no resettling. Yeah.
So you were determined that I was going to paint you smiling, weren't you, when I first came?
Yeah.
You kept saying to me, are you going to paint me smiling with my eyes or smiling with my mouth?
Exactly, yes, but I didn't know also it would take place.
Well, I didn't really know what to expect. I'd done a little bit of research, and I'd looked up her talking about her experiences to the Bundestag, Germany, which impressed me greatly. So when I actually walked in and saw this little old lady, she's going to love me saying that, I didn't really know what to think till we started work. And she was quite bemused at the idea of being painted. And I was delighted, charmed. Although she's tough, which is another thing I like about her very much.
When I first started painting this portrait of Manfred, I wanted it to be about light, because he's suffered so much and he's witnessed this horror, and yet he rejoices in life and he's full of hope. He is a witness to what happened. And so the portrait is an extension of that. Gradually, the painting has become about his gaze and about his eyes.
Where is it?
Yeah.
Oops.
Ziggy was an amazing model immediately. You know, a lot of models have a veil that you have to slowly get rid of through the process of modelling. He knew exactly as he wanted to look. I often photograph from a sort of low angle. I like to make somebody have a sort of epic feeling. I think from liking so much sculpture, so I see a lot of sculptures in museums that are on plinths, you're often slightly staring up. And Ziggy immediately sort of took up this sculptural sort of pose. And the crevices of Ziggy's face, he's got a lot of crevices, so those valleys and rifts in his face, you know, just the structure of his head. There's quite a lot in his flesh that's going to communicate those thoughts.
One day there was a ring on our door, and two of these brown-shirted military men stood there telling my mother that she had 10 minutes to pack a case, and then we had to accompany them.
We were walking, not knowing what is going to happen next. And eventually we arrived at a football ground. And there was screaming and shouting and shooting, and Everyone was disorientated. I held on to my mother, my brother, because it's somehow or other we lost our father. And we were standing there, well, till the very early morning. Not a drink of water, nothing, just standing and standing, not knowing what's going to happen. And then suddenly trams arrived, and we arrived at this notorious Łódź ghetto.
It was a terrible place. Starvation. People were hanged every so often, surrounded by barbed wire, guarded by assessmen with guns all the way around. Very little food.
We had in a room a few families. It was difficult, but we thought it will a few weeks, maybe a few months, it will finish and we will get home. But not that happened.
And I get your...
Yes.
Hang on,
The
I'll just
shawl.
let me do this. Can I ask Moni to get the little case from your brother?
Yes, Monica, my dressing table, there is the little case. Yeah, that's the one, yeah.
Ah, perfect, yeah.
The story starts 1942, where I was sent to orphanage to look after Łódź ghetto children. And these poor kids, well, they were always hungry and terrible state. And I used to accompany them to go to work and bring them back home. And I was always telling them stories about Hansel and Gretel.
You must have been a kid yourself.
Well, I was maybe 2-3 years older than they were.
So like
Yeah.
13, 14?
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Instead of the house being made of chocolate, it was actually made of bread. And you can just go and eat as much as you want. It's my birthday in April, 24/4/1944. And my brother gives me this compact, which actually has got the picture of Hansel and Gretel. So it's got like a double meaning for me. And of course, this is, for me, the most cherished and expensive thing I've got.
It's like the one thing that connects you with that time.
The German decided to make at random, take some people out. Old ones and children. And I was told they came to the orphanage, and when these children were loaded on the lorries, they were calling my name. And that is something that stays with me all my life. This picture, that I could not be there, I could not be with them.
The first camp we were sent to, I was aged 11 and my little brother was 7. It soon became apparent that the Nazis' primary purpose in keeping us alive was to exploit those able to work as slave laborers to assist the German war effort.
How have you been? Have you been well?
Yeah, I still love your smile.
Thank you, thank you. And have you sat for a portrait before? I should really have asked you right at the beginning.
No, never.
There's a portrait of your brother, is that right?
Yes. Do you want me to show it to you?
Oh, yes, please. Oh, wow, how beautiful.
A labor camp meant that every inmate had to go out to work. There was one exception made for 4 little children, of whom my brother was one. They were really too young. My brother was then 9, and the other children were even smaller. And they were permitted to stay in the camp during the day, while the rest of us, I aged 13, was deemed fit to go out to work. So these 4 children were left behind. We had to go out to work daily, and we would meet the children when we returned from work. Well, one day, it was only a matter of weeks after we arrived at that camp, when we returned from work, these children could not be found. And eventually, a member of the kitchen staff told us that during the day, 2 SS men had come into the camp and said they had orders to pick up these children and had taken them away. And such was life in the camps that there was no allowance for mourning or heartbreak. I can still hear my mother's wails, heartbreaking wails, at having lost her little boy. But the next morning, both she and I had to get up as though nothing had happened and attend the assembly, where we had to shout out our number, and an SS officer walked by with a list and would tick each number as we shouted it out, and we had to go off to work as though nothing had happened. See, today it's the real thing today.
Yeah. I'm hoping that today I'll get to see the painting of your brother, the one that you showed me on the Zoom sitting.
Yeah, I'll ask my wife to bring it in. That's it.
It's beautiful. Can I see?
Already months after our liberation, both my mother and I had been in hospital with typhus. The youngsters soon reverted to close to normality. But the adults there, and in particular my mother, was effectively sort of a broken woman. Although I was her treasure, all she had left of her family, I could sense and feel that she was still grieving her loss. And once we had established contact with my father, post-war, he sent us a few photos, including that little one.
Yes.
Quite a small photograph of my little brother. And that's the one I took to the artist.
Yes. The colours are all kind of quite earth colours, apart from the little bow tie here, which looks kind of quite bright. It's beautiful. So this is very much how you remember him?
Yes, yes.
It must have been so lovely for your mother to have something tangible, you know, having lost her son that way, to have something she could hold.
I realized that she would, of course, be terribly, terribly upset and burst into sort of heartbreaking tears, etc. But I thought that deep down, it would be of some comfort to her.
Yes, it's lovely.
I'm the only person in the world who knows he ever lived.
Mm.
I've achieved something in that, although my little brother doesn't have a grave or a gravestone, he will not be forgotten.
I knew very well where I was going. You know, one knew about Auschwitz. One knew about Auschwitz. There was no doubt what was happening. So I went to Auschwitz preparing to be gassed. I mean, I thought that was it.
I was 13, my brother was going on 14, 15, and the little ones, we were piled into trucks and we were taken away. It was very uncomfortable. There was no sanitation, there was no water, people crying, old and young together, babies crying, children crying. We just hung around my mother and stood up. There was no sitting.
It took, I think, 5-6 days. With babies, with children, traveling there without this little food, what we could still have, what it was already very little, that's finished. We never get new food. So how can I explain? It is unexplainable. When we arrived in a place, how can I explain another world?
We were rushed out by the Gestapo and divided, young from old. And my brother and I were considered well enough to go to the left, to go to be taken to Auschwitz, obviously. And my mother and the rest of the family just went the other way. And we never heard from them again.
They talked left and right, left and right. Some women took the baby on the right side, which was wrong. So they went over and they said, well, put the baby down or the child down and go on the other side. You mustn't be here. So they knew they were going to kill him. So they wouldn't let him go. So they cried, took it from their arms, and if they didn't succeed, they shot the baby. And you know, I could not understand it. I just cannot understand it.
I went down with my mother, with my 3 sisters, and with my younger brother. But they separated us. My mother, my brother, younger brother, Bela, and my younger sister, Berta, they took straight to the crematorium. It get too overwhelming. Suddenly I was there.
I know.
You know what? That is the first time that it happened to me, that I cannot carry on. The first time. It's somehow, I am there. And you cannot take it. It is so overwhelming. I cannot believe it now, suddenly, that has really happened.
It's impossible to talk usually about it. It's 4 years. Camps and this and Auschwitz, and it's
I don't think there's any hope for anybody who wasn't there to understand what it was like. And I don't think it is so important that you should know. I think you should decide to be worthy of being called a human being. You don't have to come to Auschwitz. You don't have to be in it. You know, once you've been in it, you never actually come out of it. And who was not in it will never get into it, and it's not necessary. You don't have to suffer with us. It's what you're doing now which is important.
every time I think about what he saw and what he went through, it makes me feel so sad. You know, his mother lost a son, and to think what that must have been like, that she couldn't protect him, that was, you know, and for Manfred to lose his little brother. He's just such a kind of extraordinary man, so kind, so sort of gently spoken, so interesting, and he has such a lovely family. And so it just sort of, you just want to make the painting for him. Sorry. Yeah.
I became very, very emotionally involved in this portrait. Very emotionally involved. It's like the weight of history. You know, it's such an intensely big and sad story that it imbues the process of making that portrait with, I think, a sense of responsibility.
I listen to it all and I think, gosh, it's hard not to cry, but then you can't cry when the person telling you is so extraordinary, and you know the way she's lived her life and yeah, and now has an absolute desperation to educate everybody and make them understand in an incredibly positive way.
When Ziggy's like daydreaming, lying on his bed at night, you know, what does he think about? What does he remember? You know, what horrors has he seen that must flash in his head? I usually think about universal ideas with the people that I'm working with. So with Ziggy, obviously that's incredibly powerful.
I love people. I always talk to everybody here.
In the park?
Oh, yes, and anywhere. Wherever I am, I do that, you know. Yeah, that's how it is.
So you want to sit over here? I'll help you to the step. Ah. You tend to see the positive side in things. You are able to make almost a joke out of a situation.
But in the camps, there was nothing to talk about good things.
But were you able to laugh? Would you tell jokes, or you were just afraid to do that?
No, we sometimes, you know, at night when we were alone, you know, with a group, it all depends where you were.
Well, like, would you tell
camp.
stories to each other? Like when you were with your friends
In
at night?
Auschwitz, you couldn't laugh.
You couldn't? Were you aware of what was going on?
We didn't know when we arrived to Auschwitz, Birkenau. We saw smoke. We said, oh, they must bake here.
Really, so innocent.
But within 1 day, 2 days, we knew everything about it.
When I arrived in Auschwitz, it was all everything turned out completely different from what I expected. We spent the night somewhere in a hut, and the next morning, there's a whole lot of prisoners doing the job of shaving your hair and tattooing a number on your arm. That's their job. And the one that I was delegated to, of course, started asking me a lot of questions. Where do you come from? Do you think the war would last? She thought that I have news from the war. And then came the important question, what did you do before the war? And I said, I used to play the cello. Fantastic, she said. So my life changed completely. Wait here, by that time I was naked, without hair, and a number of my arm. I was already nothing. Don't move, she said, I'll come back. And what she did is, there was a band in the camp. Who would think there's music in a concentration camp? And she went to call the conductor. And that was my great good fortune.
Do you think that music saved you in a way?
Absolutely. Not just music, cello. If I'd just been a mandolin player.
But when you came over here, it enabled you to go on with your life, with meaning.
I could only think of one thing, go and study and make up for this.
Yes, that's right.
So
yeah.
I got into the music world.
Yeah.
I moved into a different direction, you see.
Yeah.
Your book
Oh, yes. I used to have dark hair.
1947.
That was my first camp. 11 years old I was. 11 years old.
Yeah,
That's Auschwitz, yeah. It's where we got our number on the arm.
There she is.
Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you.
Hello.
The children and I were having a conversation about dignity and what that means. I remember that comes up in your testimony, if that was the worst part of your experience, the loss of dignity. But I think your response was that the hunger was actually the worst part of it.
You didn't care about dignity.
No.
No. I mean, you lost your dignity when you got in there by having your head shaved. And then to be put into a uniform instead of having your own clothes and so on.
I need to put the gold leaf on when I go home to make the necklace more golden.
How I have it. My brother put it in the heel for my mother's shoe. This side you can see where the nail went in. In the camp, my mother said we should change shoes.
Yeah.
So I had my mother's shoe.
Yeah.
Because in Auschwitz, all the gold said that even golden teeth, if you had, they were taken out.
Yeah.
So so it survived only because it was in the heel in the shoe.
Yeah.
But I wear this shoe. The heel worked out.
Yeah.
So what could I do? I put this little gold pen in my daily bread. Every day I changed it.
Yeah.
The truth is I didn't look for that. After that, I looked after the bread. And like that survived Auschwitz.
Yeah.
And therefore, this little piece is very special.
Yeah, yeah.
The story.
So I need it to be very gold with a little hole.
Yeah.
One day, we were asked to assemble, and around 4,000 plus, I think close to 5,000 of us were separated, and we were told to line up in a long column. Each one of us was given probably equivalent to half a loaf of bread, and we were told to march.
We called it a death march. Many people died on the journey. It was minus 25 degrees, and you were in a thin uniform, a striped uniform, and you had clogs on, no socks.
And we walked and walked for 21 days to some other camp, and that turned out to be Belsen, Bergen-Belsen.
Well, Bergen-Belsen wasn't, when we arrived, wasn't what you've seen of Bergen-Belsen. When we arrived, there weren't any bodies there yet. But Belsen became a sort of place where everybody was sent to at the end. I don't know. I mean, Belsen was just a moratorium, I mean. But I remember the first body in the block. I remember that, and I said, there's somebody's dead here. To get taken out. And I went to help. I'd never actually touched a body before, but I thought, no. I had a sort of a feeling, I'll do everything that's necessary. And we took that body out. But it didn't take long. I mean, you've seen pictures of Belsen. It's just bodies. You didn't even know who was dead or wasn't dead. I mean, Belsen was, yeah.
Again, we were short of water, short of food, and my aunt got very ill. And she was crying that I didn't bring her water, and it was very sad. And she was burning up, and she wanted water, and why don't you give me water? And I said, there's no water. And I went, by this time I was crawling, I couldn't walk. And I got some water from a dirty puddle in the camp. And one night she just didn't wake up. She died in the night. It was a week before liberation. She died. They took her out and threw her on the heap in the ground. So that was it. She was a young woman of 21.
I think the first thing I've got to sort out is this necklace that I want it to glint, and I haven't managed that. So I'm going to apply some gold leaf, and then I paint it over it, so it should just rub off. That's exactly what I wanted. And it's even created its own nail hole, which is rather brilliant. I didn't even do that. I think sometimes some other force takes over. Yeah, well, I'm really happy. That's good. It was extraordinary. She managed to keep a little bit of gold that her mother gave her when she was 5.
I only use 4 colours and white. In the portrait of Manfred, I sort of particularly felt like that was relevant because it would maybe kind of connect the painting to the portrait of his brother. Possibly it would have been painted with similar pigments to these. It would be really lovely if there was some kind of connection between the portrait of Manfred's little brother Herman and the portrait that I'm making of Manfred at the moment.
You know, I decided to paint the hands. You can see the right hand is like touching the left arm. So the arm bearing the number from Auschwitz is covered. It is like touching an old wound, which is healed, but forever there.
We were liberated by the Russian army on the 8th of May 1945.
Quite suddenly, these SS guards, who moments earlier had still been shooting stragglers, turned and ran for their lives. You're amazed. People kept saying, "My God, we're free, look, our guards have gone." And there was jubilation.
Oh, gosh. When they say the most important day in my life.
We didn't believe it, to tell you the truth. We couldn't believe it. You know, it's so long ago, I can't exactly describe you the feeling, but I think there was a general, till we saw the first English soldier, disbelief as it can't be true.
We heard the bombs and we heard the trucks come in, and that was the British Army came in. And we cried for food, and they threw us food. They threw us tins of, which we discovered was meat and their rations, I suppose.
I crawled out on my knees and hands because I couldn't walk. And I said, "Could you give me Wasser?" So he threw me a bottle of water and then a little parcel. I opened that, was some bread in it.
For some people, maybe the hunger was the worst. I think for me and for my 2 sisters as well, tiredness, sleeplessness. We sat down on the floor and we fall asleep.
And I remember, I think, then some people trying to reach friends who were in another block, half dead, to tell them, stay alive, we're liberated. Yeah, not always successful.
Okay.
just stop there?
I think I'm finished.
I first met Ziggy in that camp called Stolp, where he worked for the same slave labor gang.
Nice to see you.
We were the two youngsters.
Haven't seen you for
Yeah,
weeks, yeah.
yeah.
Lovely to see you again.
And we two sort of gravitated to each other. We lost each other, neither knew what had happened to the other, until we were taken on that death march. And Ziggy was already extremely weak. And at one point, Ziggy said, I cannot do another step. I must sit down. And I said to him, Ziggy, if you sit down, you're dead. You can't. He said, I can't. So I sort of put myself around his shoulders and started dragging him. And then someone who was walking nearby saw that I could barely do it, so they assisted. So 2 or 3 of us, between us, really dragged Ziggy along. So that is how he remained alive. Whenever I meet you, I think back of when we first met.
Did we ever think that we'll be here at our age?
I'm not trying to flatter you, Ziggy, but one of the pleasures in life, for me, is our continuing friendships.
Absolutely.
Truly.
Absolutely. You are as near as a brother of mine.
Both of us have spent 75 years of our lives here. And I still think that we were so fortunate to end up to live our lives in complete freedom in the best country in the world.
I say that to everybody. But you remember, both of us, when we came to England, I say, why don't you speak? Why don't you go and speak, just to tell him what happened to you?
I couldn't dream of it for a long, long time.
Yeah, I know.
When we came back in 1946, people didn't really want to know.
No.
It took years before people were prepared to listen to our story.
Oh, yes.
If you look at it purely materially, Ziggy, everything that's in short supply goes up in value. Well, Holocaust survivors are very few now, so we've become a sort of precious commodity. It may sound a strange way of putting it, but I think that's what it boils down to. People realize that it won't be very long before there will be no first-hand witnesses who can stand up and say, this is my experience, and speak in the first person.
This story seems to be just unbelievable and impossible. But it must never be forgotten.
If we can all remember, just for a moment, what they went through as an experience I can't imagine.
You know, it's a recent history. It's not something we're reading about from the Roman Empire. You know, this is very recent. And it would be history's mistake to think that we won't do this again. The more we understand it, the more we learn about it. Teach our children about it. You know, don't let the history disappear, because it just becomes the pages of a book and it becomes so distant.
It took me many, many years to get the better of my anger. You know, I really hated the Germans, and, you know, my children don't speak German, and yeah, everything German was taboo in my house. It took me quite a long time
I have to cope with what my memories. I have some are very pleasant because I try to think of my family in a good way, not when the bad times were. And I do. I can stay awake hours thinking about my village. I can think of my mother. I can think of all my family in a pleasant way.
I decided to put all this behind me and try and live a life as close to normality as possible.
I wanted to be I am a grandmother.
You wanted to be a happy grandmother?
Grandmother, grandmother.
And great-grandmother?
Yeah.
And mother?
Yeah. This life is short enough. Why should you throw away that what you have?
I am a positive person. Yes, I try to help my fellow human being.
Don't hate people. If you don't like somebody, you don't like, finished. You don't like him. But don't hate people.
I want to be remembered as an ordinary person who tried to be nice to everyone, irrespective of religion or color or whatever. And I think I have achieved that.
It is, well, you say deeply moving. It's more than that, isn't it? It's heartrending, really. But then you meet them, and you can't believe they are as they are. You know what I mean? Some of them are able to forgive. Others, say you must never hate.
Thank you.
That takes an incredible degree of character. Would we be able to get through what they got through? And emerge the other side like some of them did, without having gone crazy? I mean, it is truly remarkable. And when they finally go, which I dread because they are so special, then the portraits will remain in their memory, but also in memory of all those others who died there, members of their family, and so many others.
I can't take my eyes off it.
You should go near it. Just come near it, just have a look.
A lot of my mother's dignity is captured in that painting. She's not somebody to be taken lightly.
It looks good, you know.
There it is. It's quite moving to see amongst all this splendor.
Let's go and take a closer look.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
How do you feel?
Like I'm speechless.
She and her family were forced to endure unimaginable conditions on the terrible 5-day-long journey by train to Auschwitz-Birkenau.
Standing here today, and with 4 generations, not alone, in 4 generations, in this room, and my picture is here. Thanks really for the print, and thank very much to the English people that I achieved that here.
You look really handsome.
Thank you.
He's the most special human being in the whole world. He's just really amazing. I can't talk about him without crying.
This is really quite unbelievable. I'm truly emotionally so affected by this.
It's actually very fitting because he's so regal and poised. His portrait is going to be in the Queen's personal gallery.
Every line tells a story.
Wear them with pride.
It's a great privilege.
Nothing actually phases him. We were all so nervous about today. The only one who wasn't was Ziggy.
I really must thank you for this unbelievable thing you did.
Do you quite like it, this one?
I wouldn't dare say no, he'd kill me.
It's very special.
Hello.
I love it.
Nice to meet you.
Absolutely fantastic. So what do you think of your portrait?
Fantastic. I am really very happy.
It must be a wonderful face to paint.
Lily is a
There's
gift.
There's so much character.
It is positively Holbein-esque, I think.
She painted not only my likeness, but she painted my heart and soul.
But it's such a marvellous addition to the Royal Collection. Are you reasonably pleased with that? Because
I'm very pleased and very honoured.
I wanted to capture as many as we could.
Yes, well...
To remember what you had to endure.
Very important.
That is incredibly special. I love the story about your silver powder compact.
Yes, well, it's my prized possession.
Yes.
It's incredible.
This is me.
Absolutely. Well, I can see it.
And this is the painting.
This is the...
Is it Italian?
I think it's
Yes.
absolutely
Yeah.
incredible.
Fantastic, yes.
Are you pleased with it?
Very, very pleased.
Very.